Beam me up, Scotty. Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and I want to welcome everybody. I want to welcome all my friends in the Senate that are serving on this committee. Thank you for doing so. This is possibly the most senior committee that everybody, it's full of chairmen and former speakers, and we're up to. And everybody's very capable, and I really appreciate you serving on this committee. I look forward to it. I think we'll be a great committee. So thank you for that. I'm really excited about this. So just a couple of housekeeping things. Traditionally, I've ran the meeting with when it's 5 people, that we don't require a second for motions. If that's acceptable, maybe we just continue to do that. Each one of you is a fifth of this committee, and you can certainly entitled to bring a motion and we can talk about it. Other than that, we work pretty hard in this committee. We cover a lot of great topics, and we work with these fine people out here, a lot of agency folks and people in industry. So I'm excited about that. One little personal thing that I have is I'm really partial to being called Mr. Chairman. And so please, if you can remember that. I never did go for the chair thing, so I would appreciate that if you can remember. And let's just go ahead and get started. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 2, Wyoming Telecommunications Act Sunset Date. And this is a bill from the interim committee bill, and it relates to the Wyoming Telecommunications Act, which was up for sunset in 2023. This extends the sunset to, can't remember where we went to. Yeah, 2025. So thank you very much for that. There is some proposed amendments. We discussed a possible amendment from the interim, and we asked that the bill title be broadened for that amendment, and that didn't quite get done. So we have some work to do this, but I turn it open now, and who would like to address us about this bill? Mr. Pickard, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Members of the committee, my name is Dave Pickard. Appreciate taking testimony this morning in regards to Senate File 2, Telecommunications Act Sunset Date. As you, those that were involved in the interim will recall, I represent Lumen, and we came with a couple ideas. One of them was to go ahead and let this act sunset in its entirety, recognizing that there is not the political will to do that for a variety of reasons that we don't necessarily disagree with. The concerns that were brought up are by not only the consumer groups, but also our colleagues in the industry. But what we do have in front of you, and I believe, has it been handed out? Thank you very much. We do have a very straightforward and simple amendment before you, which basically does this. If a carrier, local exchange carrier, would like to not participate in the receipt of universal service funds in the future, they would not be regulated by this act. It does not prohibit or it does not relieve them of any obligations under the rest of Wyoming statutes, which includes the payment of universal service fund, which includes 911 and relay. So it would simply be that their local exchange service would not be regulated by the Public Service Commission. It does not exclude them from any of the federal act, which would also regulate discontinuation of service. So we're not abandoning any customers. It's simply the regulatory aspect of the local exchange. Again, it also does not relieve them of any obligations under the federal act on wholesale controls and regulation. So with that, Mr. Chairman, as you discussed about the interim where the title was going to be left open a little bit, you'll see it on the proposed amendment, page 1, line 2. We're asking to insert after the first section of Telecommunications Act, we're asking you to insert clarifying services not regulated by the Act. And then we go on further down at page 1, line 14, and at 3715-104. And I apologize for the little handwritten 5 in there in the statutory. My 5 at the top of my keyboard is stuck, and so I didn't move over to the keypad. But at any rate, 3715-104, services not regulated by this title. We're adding Romanet 8, which would read retail local exchange service offered by a telecommunications company that, after notifying the commission, elects not to receive distributions from the Universal Service Fund pursuant to 3715, 501, or 502, and then renumber as necessary. That essentially, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, is the proposed amendment that we ask that you support.
Thank you, Mr. Pickard. Any questions for Mr. Pickard? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, if we pass this and a company opts out, are they subject, we have a set of fees, do we not, to support the Universal Service Fund? Are they still liable for those fees?
Mr. Pickard.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, yes, they are.
Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, why then did they seek to opt out? Would they seek to opt out?
Mr. Pickard.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, the telecommunications industry is leaps and bounds ahead of this act right now. As you recall some of our testimony in the interim, the direction the telecom industry is going is to less regulation, more expansive for the technologies that are coming about and coming into the marketplace. And as we testified to earlier, we would prefer the act to sunset in and of itself. We don't think it's necessary anymore in this climate. But if the act is going to go forward, this would allow those carriers, those local exchange carriers that choose not to be regulated by the Public Service Commission to opt out, and we would not be taking the funds that are currently available to us. And what I might also add is you'll possibly recall Lumen when they were CenturyLink and Quest Communications did go through a regulatory filing with the commission that relieved them in most of their areas in the state of Wyoming. And this is just following up on that for the 2 smaller local exchanges that the company does own.
Go ahead, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, and he just touched on a much broader topic there. It's my perception that we are gradually losing universal telephone service, that there are getting to be areas in the country, some of the rural areas, where the service simply is not very good. I've had more experience with people who abandon the landline and then their cell phone service just is not up to par. And I see a lot of dropped calls. And Mr. Chairman, that makes me worry about the need for continuing regulation.
I kind of expected you would have that point, Senator Scott. Appreciate it. I would ask people as we testify, and maybe the Public Service Commission who will testify next, so they can address the amendment, that we address Senator Scott's concerns, discussions. So, Senator Barlow, it's the first time I've ever said that, I think. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I guess my inquiry would be, Mr. Pickard, is what number of consumers would be impacted this? And maybe you can only speak to the company that you represent, but what number of consumers or what communities, just so I can have a context of the reach of this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Barlow, and it rolls off the tongue very nicely.
Starts with an S.
Senator, I would need to get back to you on the two exchanges that we have and the number of customers, but it is very small. And it is only if Lumen elects to do that, which I suspect they would, but at the appropriate time with the appropriate discussion with the commission.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in that view, how many other communities have other providers who would also, they would be eligible to do this as well? And maybe the commission can answer some of that, but I just want to understand that. This is one company, Mr. Chairman, asking for this. What other entities does this actually come under? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Pickard.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I will let the commission or some of my colleagues in the industry speak for themselves.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Pickard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Petrie, would it be okay if we put you up next?
Mr. Chairman, now we just.
Okay. It's really good to see you, and I would normally have you go first, but I kind of wanted to get that amendment out there so we know what we're talking about. So, appreciate it.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. It's great to see you as well. I'm Chris Petrie. I'm chairman at the Wyoming Public Service Commission. With me is our chief counsel, John Burbridge. Of course, we're familiar with the bill that's under discussion today. And as I think we said over the interim, it appeared sensible to the commission to extend the sunset date for a more thorough discussion. There are various aspects of the Telecom Act that we thought would be worth further consideration. As far as this amendment is concerned, the first thing that occurs to me is that I think I understand this to eliminate the possibility under 3715-202B that provides for a return to regulation after notice and hearing upon a finding that a company that was previously found to be competitive was no longer in an effectively competitive situation. We have not had any proceedings of that sort, and there has in fact been just the one CenturyLink, now Lumen, proceeding for finding that the company was subject to effective competition. That's now been several years since that occurred. I believe, if I can attempt to address Senator Barlow's question,
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there are about 29,000 customers that are currently served by the 9 fully regulated companies. Those are the providers of non-competitive essential telecommunications services. Those are the companies that are recipients of Wyoming Universal Service Fund support in the last several years, I guess.
So 29,000 total.
I believe that's the
Thank you for
correct
that.
number, although I don't have my documentation here. That's from memory, but
That's
I
okay.
believe that's correct. 9 companies, 29,000 customers.
Thank you.
As I understand this, it wouldn't affect the commission's handling of interconnection affairs that are delegated to us by federal and our own state statutes. So those interconnection arrangements between carriers, I believe under this amendment would still be brought before the commission for our determination.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, there, nothing else, unless there are
Okay,
questions.
let's see if folks have questions for you. Let's go with Senator Scott's question, if we could, because he had asked about the general state, suggesting there was a decline in telecommunications service in rural areas. Do you have an ability to address that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We do continue to receive complaints, largely from rural areas that are sort of historically the main source of those problems. These are areas where there is aged landline service, landline equipment, and insufficient cell phone coverage, basically. Those tend to be where the complaints come from. And what we do now is we work with the company, whoever is the company that's subject of a complaint, of a service quality complaint, and we work with the company to try to get those complaints resolved, even though our actual power over those quality of service issues is fairly limited and actually very limited in the case where it's a competitive carrier.
Senator Scott, did you have some follow-up in the area?
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd raise 2 points. One, just a simple question. Do you keep a log or a record of how many of these complaints that you get? If so, how many are you getting on an annual basis?
Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, we do have records of those, and the production of that number would be a relatively simple matter, but I don't have that number with me right at the moment. My perception is that they tend to be somewhat weather-related, that in the spring when it's raining, that has a bad effect on the aged landline equipment. And just to guess, I'd say that it probably averages 2 or 3 per month that we actually receive from complaints, and that's not equivalent to saying that that's the total of the problems experienced by customers by any means. Those are the ones that actually contact the commission to complain about their situation.
And did you have follow-up, Senator Scott?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, and Commissioner Petrie mentioned that they tend to be from areas where the cell service is a bit spotty. And I think that's right. I've heard on occasion allegations you get one of these satellite hookups, and that can be a substitute. And actually, one of my brothers tried that. And there was you remember we had a corporations committee a few years ago, we had a demonstration of those things. And he found a problem that wasn't apparent from that demonstration. And that is when you call a business, particularly one that has an automated answering system, there's enough latency that they hang up on you before you can respond. And they think they haven't got the machine thinks they haven't, or the secretary, depending on who's answering, thinks there isn't a live call. And I had to, using a landline, I had to call those outfits for him and say, can you call thus and such, he can't get through to you. And that was a major problem with that. He had to drop that service. So I think I'd be interesting what Commissioner Petrie thinks, but I think he was accurate saying that the issues occur where the cell phone service is spotty.
Mr. Petrie, did you want to take a stab at that?
Mr. Chairman, I will take a stab at that, and Senator Scott. I can tell you that a fair number of complaints that the commission receives have some connection to automated customer service and billing systems. I'm not aware of us having received any complaints that involve the latency issue of customers using satellite service and having problems with that. But I would not be at all surprised if satellite users do experience a greater level of difficulty in dealing with those systems, which can be pretty challenging regardless, and do produce quite a bit of frustration.
Senator Scott.
Chairman, I would think that you would not receive complaints about that because they would figure as a characteristic of the service and not something you can do anything about.
I might pick up on this a little bit, Senator Scott. To my knowledge, most of these systems that we're talking about, they're an old technology called Anaconda systems, probably, and they were a way to multiplex in an analog way to pair up different households on the same lines. But they had very good range. But those systems are, to have a landline system that might be 20+ miles long using this kind of technology, and we have longer loops than that in Wyoming. We have some that are 60 miles, I think. That has been the source of the real complaint, because there's no substitute for that. I mean, you could lay a fiber line out there, but you're only picking up a dozen households or something, and it's a real challenge to make the economics work. There are some things that are happening in terms of broadband deployment, in terms of other subsidies not covered by this act. And I don't know if that's helping or not. We had a little discussion earlier about the satellite system phones. CenturyLink at the time had a program to replace those analog systems with satellite phones. And really, I thought the satellite phones worked pretty good. I think most people are pretty happy with them. They do what they need to, but Senator Scott may have a really good point about interacting with the automatic equipment on the other side. But Mr. Petrie, can you kind of comment on the broad, am I generally correct? And are things getting better with deployment of broadband and things like that?
Mr. Chairman, certainly there is broadband being deployed out into the more rural areas in the state, and I believe that is providing opportunities for other choices. There's you know, when the CenturyLink matter came before the commission for their deregulation petition, it basically boiled down to availability of cell phone coverage and satellite broadband with voice capability as the other alternatives in many areas. Every bit of broadband that's pushed out into the countryside is going to help by providing other alternative choices. And so I think everything he said is correct.
And Mr. Petrie, what's the state of line of sight microwave-based telecom alternatives? I know that we have some of those in Fremont County. They require repeaters to be on a line of sight basis, but they don't have the latency problem. They sometimes have weather problems, as I understand, but I yield to you, Mr. Petrie.
Mr. Chairman, correct again, that type of equipment is helpful in areas where it's available. And I understand also that it does not experience the kind of latency issues. And as you point out, there is yet potential for weather interference, and I think the main problem with it is just the limited availability.
Great, thank you, Chairman Petrie. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And not to bog us down too far, Mr. Chairman, but I do appreciate the conversation because it's really been on the plate of the Transportation Committee the last couple of years. We have spent quite a bit of time on the broadband issue because of the infrastructure dollars that have come in, and you can just go on just about any road and we're laying down broadband very quickly in Wyoming. One piece though that I'd be curious if you have any perspective on it, and we have friends in the room that might. A couple of years ago, we passed a bill in the Senate that allowed for the use of states' towers. And I was kind of excited about getting that passed because I thought it might give an opportunity to alleviate some of the concerns that Senator Scott just expressed. But we still have plenty of dead spots out there. I just thought that we maybe had enough towers that we could help some people. Have you run across any of that? Has that helped at all, or do you have a perspective on it?
Mr. Petrie.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, I don't have any special information about that topic. I myself travel around the state a bit, and it does seem that the cellular coverage is gradually improving and continues to gradually improve, but we don't really have any special information at the commission about installation of new facilities on towers or improvement of cell service in any particular area.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we could hear from the Department of Transportation how that's going some. I do remember that bill very well. You worked on it hard.
Mr. Chairman, I think that might be something maybe in the upcoming interim that we could touch on. I do have some concerns out across state. We've all run across areas where it just absolutely goes dead.
Sure.
That becomes a safety and security issue. And so, of course, we spent a lot of time on the WildLink situation, and Chairman Boner will pick up where we left off and take off with that. But anyway, thank you for.
It's all true. I just want to point out that this act doesn't cover cellular service. It doesn't cover wireless services. So, and that's where the world is now. So, Senator Scott.
And Mr. Chairman, I point out, I think the problem in some of the rural areas is pretty significant. I know with our ranching operation, we lost cellular service on about 2/3 of the place when the feds changed some regulations a few years ago, quite a number of years ago now. And for ranching operation, it's a nuisance. Where I've heard special complaints is from some of the oil and gas people that need it at their well sites and it's just not available. It's a separate issue from this telecommunications act.
It certainly is separate, and I sort of feel like it's important. We're new and we need to embrace all this, and I think, Senator Scott, you might be referring to when the conversion occurred from analog service to digital service, and everybody agreed that digital was inferior, but I think it's built back to where it is working pretty good. So if we could proceed on ahead, and Chairman Petrie, if you have any last thoughts about this and the amendment, and I'm sorry, we've got Senator Barlow has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Petrie, I think you made a comment earlier about the interconnect requirements and responsibilities. You believe that it would still be something you could engage in with these if this was out. Where is that? Because if we strike their responsibility under the entire act except for the assessments, is that federal law that they would then be required to be under? I just want to be clear about it because it seems to me. The second thing is 3715-404 says that they can discontinue service in these non-competitive areas without any notice to the. So I just want to make sure we understand that 29,000 potential customers could, without any review, all of a sudden find their service discontinued if they're exempted from the entirety of this act. If I understand that incorrectly, I'm glad to be corrected, but I just want to be sure I understand it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Senator Barlow. We're all still covered by the Federal Communications Commissions Act, the Federal Act. And what they're referring to is interconnection between carriers, so that, you know, every company, every call that you make probably goes across different carriers, and they have a means by which those calls are handled. And it's largely governed by federal law, where some responsibilities are delegated to the state within that law, and we will continue those in our law, but I'll yield to Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Barlow, the interconnection aspect is about the relationship between carriers for wholesale services. And so those are the contractual agreements that allow access to one system by another telecommunications company's system. And I believe that this amendment would leave the commission still handling interconnection agreements. So the interconnection agreements get filed with the commission and approved, and they're reviewed at the commission, and they're also in that case available for other telecommunications companies to see. And I believe that they are then able to insist upon the terms that their other competitors get. So if you have a big carrier doing business with small carrier A under certain terms, then I believe that small carrier B can acquire those similar terms in order to prevent the large carrier from discriminating amongst the other carriers that it does business with on a wholesale basis. So for that part, as far as the 29,000 customers that receive Wyoming Universal Service Funds or support from Wyoming Universal Service Funds, and that are customers of non-competitive essential service providing companies, it is not my perception that those companies or those customers would necessarily be at any heightened risk that those companies would abandon any part of their service. Those are generally not companies where there is a great deal of difficulty with the quality of service. They seem to be fairly robust in their health as telecommunications companies. And so I don't think that they would be at any heightened risk of being abandoned.
Welcome. Anything else you'd like to add?
Mr. Chairman, the only other thing that I should have mentioned is that the commission requires outage reporting from telecommunications companies, and I'm not sure whether the amendment would preclude that requirement being placed on a company that.
Can you find that out?
Yes, sir.
And work with the folks and let us know, and maybe if we think that's important, we could add that.
Very well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I love to sit and talk about how things are going over there. You've got a heavy workload, and I really appreciate you coming over.
Thank you.
We'll catch up, I promise. Who else would like to address the committee on this bill? Me Too testimony is okay, too. Ms. Levin, welcome. Ms. Lee, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jody Levin. I'm here on behalf of Charter and Verizon. My clients are two of the entities who support extending the act and believe that it has substantial merit, partially because it provides regulatory certainty and operational clarity. So there are sections of this act where my clients are actually customers. So having those customer protections are important. We have full faith in our Public Service Commission that they wouldn't engage in mission creep. But there also are provisions of this act that clarify where they are not able to regulate. And as a competitive carrier, that's very important to my clients. In instances in other states where acts have sunset, they have experienced commissions coming in and re-regulating competitive services. So again, we don't believe that that would necessarily be the case here in Wyoming, but nonetheless, we do believe that there is merit in extending this act. There's also much activity happening federally around definitions, particularly on broadband, that could necessitate changes to the Wyoming Act, which is why instead of trying to modify the act, which my clients don't disagree that there are provisions of this act that have outlived their useful life, but we didn't want to get in a situation where we had to make modifications and then find out that the feds are changing requirements that cause us to come back in and further modify. So that's why we asked for the simple extension, Mr. Chairman. We support the act extending, and we're neutral on the amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Levin. Questions for Ms. Levin? Thank you. Ms.
Thank
Lee?
you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. My name is Kristen Lee, and I represent Union Telephone Company and Union Wireless. They are a legacy landline provider as well as a wireless provider. So in this instance, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to just quickly address Senator Barlow's question. Union, at this point, we have no plans to ask to be deregulated for our legacy landline customers under the amendment that's been suggested today by my colleague. I was going to say we're agnostic, but Mr. Pickard is concerned when I say something like that. We have no opinion whether this is a good. It's fine with us. We take no position one way or the other. And to be honest with you, we would lean towards supporting it as an update to the act. And we absolutely agree with the prior testimony of Mr. Chairman Petrie that this does not affect the responsibilities of interconnection under the federal law. And we are big interconnectors with other companies. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. You have a very unique journey in this room on this act. She's been with CenturyLink, she was Public Service Commission, and now here. So welcome. We appreciate your perspective. And Ms. Levin, you've been here a long time too. Also want to point out that Union is a company that has sees the wireless world and really markets to the industry that operates in oil and gas, especially appreciate Union's coverage. They work very hard at it, so to be commended.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any questions from the committee? Anybody else wish to address us? Mr. Hendricks, welcome. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jason Hendricks with Range. We're a local exchange provider in numerous parts of the state. Actually, Range is our DBA, and we have 4 separate legal entities that operate under that DBA, 3 local exchange carriers, incumbent regulated companies, and then 1 competitive carrier. We're in support of extension of the act. We're also a member of the Wyoming Telecom Association, so during the interim, I presented some proposed changes to update the act, but just due to time constraints and some uncertainty on the federal side, it just didn't work out to fully be able to update the act like we were hoping to at the beginning. So a simple extension seems to work well. There are a lot of things going on the federal side that were already touched on by Mr. Chairman as far as broadband expansion. We as a company are generally the way that we operate, we are very much fiber to the home in our most populated areas, and then we expand out the fiber as far as we can. We don't generally have the service quality problems, largely because of that. We're extending the fiber out. Our copper loop length extension to that is pretty short. And so there's part of seeing what happens over the next couple of years is seeing how much the money that's coming into the state helps to expand broadband, to see how much network is still needed out there that would justify the regulation, how much competition develops because of this. Really, we're in a transition period. Historically, telecom was regulated like electricity and natural gas. And then because of technology that happened and changes in the state act and the federal act, there was the network opened up for competition. And so there is competition in a large part of the state. And so in those parts of the state, yeah, there probably isn't a need for regulation. Competition takes care of that. But there are rural areas where the rural provider is the only provider. There isn't a viable, reliable alternative. Cellular's not there, satellite still has issues. And so this act helps us to expand our network, which we do. We use universal service dollars to upgrade the network, to maintain service quality. And it's working, and it's beneficial to the customers of the state. It keeps rates affordable. So we are supportive of it. We just a couple other things in response. We are part of the 29,000 customers that we serve. We as Range have no intention of taking advantage of this provision of the amendment that's being proposed. What else? I guess I just also say, as far as us being out there, we are a network to our competitors as well. We serve towers. We are a transport provider for our competitors. We have a lot of competitors that rely on our network. So us being out there is not only beneficial to our customers, it's beneficial to other carriers' customers as well. So I think those are the main points I wanted to raise, but I'd be happy to take any questions you might have for me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hendricks. You have a great company, really familiar with Du Bois Telephone. So a lot of it's in my district, so really think you do a good job. How about the amendment? You support the amendment, neutral on the amendment?
We're neutral.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Hendricks? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who else would like to address us on this bill? Ms. Wilkinson, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Catherine Wilkinson here today on behalf of All West Communications and Silver Star Communications. Very green in this area compared to my esteemed colleagues behind me, but here today to tell you that we do support the act moving forward, and we are neutral on the amendment, and thank you for your attention on this matter, and I would stand for any questions.
I always love your testimony because you just get it right to it. And she'll be testifying probably on the next bills too. So questions for Ms. Wilkinson? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Anybody else want to address the committee? Would anybody else in the room like to address the committee? Do we have anybody online that would like to address the committee on this? We don't. Committee, you've heard the testimony. What is your pleasure? Got a motion by Boner. Discussion. Anybody like to offer the amendment? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the proposed amendment.
Okay.
I think everybody has that in front of them.
Thank you, Senator Landon. And I would point out, this makes a minor correction to the title. Usually we stay away from amending the title too much, but in this case, this was fully discussed in the interim, and we actually directed staff to draft the title more broadly so that we could bring this very amendment or a variation of it. So I went ahead and talked to staff, and they suggested the title amendment on page 2, which is clarifying services not rated by the Act. You know, the title has a purpose to provide notice of what we're talking about. It's when you mess with a title and it's deceptive, I think we can get in constitutional problems, but I think we're going to be okay on this one. So I do just point out that we are amending the title. So discussion on the amendment. Senator Boner.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the discussion as far as constitutionality. I completely agree that we're well within the intent of why we have a short title. But express my concern about the amendment. I still think there's a lot of concern for rural customers that rely upon these protections. I think that they're important. And I was under the impression of the committee's decision. Obviously, we got a new committee. We can do whatever we want. But
Sure.
The intent was simply to push this back 2 years and to have a more thorough discussion. There's lots of varying interests and very complex. I think we have a lot of very complex negotiations in front of us. Therefore, I think we should just stay the course and not try to get a head start on those discussions.
Okay, anybody else?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Scott.
I agree exactly with Senator Boner.
Thank you, Senator Scott. So there we have it. I do think that this was discussed at our last meeting. So I don't think it's a new thing. I do want to point that out. Mr. Pickard, can you refresh my memory about that as to the extent of discussion of this proposed amendment? Not the specifics, but the concept at our last interim meeting. I'm trying to make the point that it's not a new thing, but maybe I'm failing.
Well, no, Mr. Chairman, I think you're absolutely correct. We did have extensive conversation, probably an hour and a half to 2 hours worth of discussion about the concept. Again, just making the pitch that the industry is moving forward. What you heard from my colleagues is talking about putting fiber out there. Lumen is the same thing. We're moving strictly to deploying fiber to our customers. And in these very small local exchanges that are somewhat compact, and I will follow up with the exact numbers and geographical locations of those to the committee. But the fact of the matter is that it's time to at least give the opportunity for a little bit of relief here, and that's what we discussed in the interim.
We did discuss it. I just want to make that point. So, okay, thank you, Mr. Pickard. All right, any further discussion? Senator DeLand?
So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the cautions by members of the committee. I'm going to follow this. I'm going to support the amendment because it sounds like it's been vetted at least during the interim and then presented today. I just am going to be wondering as we go. Today, it sounds like there's no plans whatsoever to take advantage of anybody. My curiosity is what would have to change for somebody to change what they're doing out there for our constituents. So I'm going to watch this carefully. But today I'm going to support the amendment.
Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, let me see if I can articulate the concern on behalf of some of the rural customers. You've had a massive deregulation. A number of the rural customers, the cell service available is frankly spotty and not really adequate, especially for more complicated, longer conversations where the drops are a problem. I think we need to look in the next 2 years at some form of regulation that does not necessarily extend to price and everything else that might be regulated, but really concentrates on quality of service in some of the rural areas. I don't think we've got a good solution. And I think certain of the carriers out there are capable of simply saying, let's get rid of these more rural customers because they're too expensive to serve. And I worry about the extent to which we're going to preserve a universal service. For some of the carriers, I do hear town complaints as well on occasion. But I'm afraid the amendment is probably a step too far at this point. I think we need a solution that is more sophisticated than what's on the table at this point.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come a long way since we had that series of interim meetings where customers were very upset with the level of CenturyLink service in parts of the state. I have not personally heard, other than from you often, as Senator Scott, about quality of service issues in rural telecom. I really think we've moved forward. We have extended this sunset on this act several times. And Senator Scott, I actually first started working with you in 1995. 29 years ago, I was put on this committee to help develop the original act because I was on different committees and I'd been in regulation in another state, and that's where I met and started working with you. And we've been on this committee together most of that time. So me in the House and you in the Senate, and then together. And I want to say it's been a joy, and that's quite a time.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind the story, I
I
had
just
been-
told one, so I think you get it right.
Mr. Chairman, what happened in 95, I had been off this committee, had not participated in the interim. And the proposal came along for the new act,
Right.
and we had I was the swing vote in the Senate committee as to whether to kill the bill or not. And
Gee,
I-
nothing's changed.
I know.
I was having trouble making up on my mind. And when the vote came, I voted maybe. And that got me about 10 seconds extra to make up my mind and flip a coin.
Well, I remember those days very well.
Finally voted do pass it, and I'm still not sure I did the right thing.
Well, I know that you've complained about your telephone service since those times, so I wish somebody would do something for you, I really do. Anyway, thank you, Senator Scott.
Chairman,
Go ahead.
we did have, it's a good deal more than just the service I get, but.
I know.
I did have a complaint a couple of years ago, and I forget how many years ago now, where we were just playing out of service for a week. And we are in the situation where the cell coverage is gradually expanded, improved, but it is still, there are times it's just not there.
Well, thank you, Senator Scott. I think we've come a long way. I certainly don't hear of many complaints, and people have lots of choices. So anyway, any further discussion on the amendment? I'll just put it to the question, okay? All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no?
No.
Got 3 noes and 2 ayes, so the amendment has failed. Back on the bill. Any further discussion on the bill? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think most of the testimony was extend the act and let's continue to work on it, understand what develops at the federal level. It always occurs to me that when we extend things, when they fall makes a difference. So 2 years from now, there'll be a new committee at the beginning of the next legislature, the 68th, and they will be taking on potentially maybe it's a repeal of the act, or maybe it's other things. So I don't know when the right time is in my short tenure in the legislature, but there's obviously folks here that have been here a lot longer. If 2 years is adequate, or it times it correctly, that we can actually take up this. The other thing I would offer, Mr. Chairman, is it almost obligates this to be an interim topic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's certainly correct. I think the 2 years was chosen very deliberately with the amount of change that's occurring both in broadband deployment and federal telecom laws. So I think it was chosen very deliberately to fall on the next general session, so we don't have the obstacle of the budget session 2/3. If I can look at the industry and convey that everyone feels that this is not quite the right solution, but they want more time to find the right solution. And I think we've agreed on the 2 years. Show of hands, okay with 2 years? He wants it 0. He wants 0 or 1. Yeah, and so do I, in fact. In fact, I will be a no vote on the bill. I think we've kicked this down the road several times. It's just, we're not doing much in telecom, really, and there's no need. So I will be a no vote, but that's okay. And so any further discussion? All right, I'd like to introduce Debbie Russell, who's going to be calling the roll here. We're ready for roll call. And you already know her whole family. Her husband is Sergeant at Arms in the House, and Sherry Biggs is who you have to do your bills with. So go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Barlow? Senator Boner?
Aye.
Senator Landon?
Aye.
Senator Scott?
Aye.
And Mr. Chairman?
No. Thank you very much. Thanks to all the industry that testified. We'll be seeing you in the interim next time. And if you want to try to get your amendment back in, I suggest you do some education. All right, the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 5. It's in the realm of our, and thank you to the Public Service Commission for coming. We love you guys. Say hi to everybody. Take care. Now The other agency that we spend a lot of time with is the Department of Insurance. We have Commissioner Rude here, who can help us with the next two bills, and we'll just start with Senate File 5. Commissioner, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Commissioner Jeff Root from the Department of Insurance. Senate File 5, it's really a small change to our medical malpractice reporting requirements. Annually, the statutes require that malpractice insurers report information to the Department of Insurance, and we keep track of that information. We compile the data, and we actually attach it to our annual report. The collection of the data was really in response to a couple of different times historically where we've had a shortage of malpractice insurers. And so this helps us keep a tab on that concern. The department now has the ability to get that exact same information without getting it from the insurance industry. We can get it from a national database where there's a federal requirement that they report the same information. And quite frankly, it's much easier for us to use that information in the form of the national database. What happens when we get it from the insurers is there's always a long back and forth that they don't do it right. And we ask it in a certain way, and we want it broken down in a certain way, and there's a lot of man hours on both ends that are taken up. We're now able to get it from this federal database, and we'd like to relieve the requirement of the insurers to have to give it to us and for us to ask for them. We would be happy to just use the database, and then if something were to happen to it, we would give industry notice that we'll be going to the old way again. And so really this just gives us the discretion not to impose this burden on the insurance industry. And so with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions for Commissioner Root? Thank you very much. Stay close. Ms. Wilkinson, you're up. Just smile and put your thumb up. Okay. Anybody else wish to testify on this bill? Anybody else? Committee, is there anything online? Committee, you've heard the testimony. What is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Oh, it's just like stereo here. I'll give that to Landon. And any discussion, any amendments? This is a quick one. Debbie, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Barlow. Aye. Senator Boner.
Aye.
Senator Landon.
Aye.
Senator Scott.
Aye.
And Mr. Chairman.
Aye. That bill is carried, so with 5 ayes, and we'll now take up the next file, which is why the commissioners do. Yes, Senator Scott.
Who do you want to carry this?
Yeah, let's see, the telecom, who would like to carry the telecom? Let's just we're timeout for housekeeping. I'm not giving it to you, Senator Scott, you're too mean on it.
I'll learn to be meaner.
Okay, Senator Boner, I'll give that to you. Would you like to carry the insurance, the first one? You got it. Okay. Back to the Insurance Commission, we're going to talk about Senate File 6, and you've got your whole crew, so introduce them for us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, once again, Commissioner Jeff Root, Department of Insurance. With us is Deputy Commissioner Tana Howard and Brian Stevens, our licensing supervisor. Senate File 6 deals with code revisions and really a reorganization of our anti-rebating statutes, which are rather outdated. And I will let Mr. Stevens and Ms. Howard address the bill.
Who's going to go first? Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Stevens, licensing supervisor with the Department of Insurance. So the first thing you'll notice about this bill is it's rather lengthy. There's a lot of red in it. I would like to say not a lot of that red is changes. The majority of that red is moving things from one section to another. We're not changing the language in the least bit. We're trying to consolidate this from 4 sections into 2 sections because we're trying to simplify our unfair discrimination and our rebating standards. Currently, we have different standards for property and health insurance, or property and casualty insurance, and life and health insurance. We are standardizing the rebating requirements across all lines. Our current laws haven't been revised since 1983. We feel they're punitive in nature, so we are using a new NAIC model language to help the business laws for rebating in Wyoming become more business friendly.
And if you don't mind, take a little second to talk about NAIC and what it is and what it does, because they've never heard this before.
Absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. The NAIC is the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. It's a national organization that all 50 states and I believe 4 territories and the District of Columbia all buy into. It's a national discussion of all the insurance commissioners where we get together as states and make sure that there's uniformity and reciprocity across all the states. They also offer accreditation so that we know that each state that is accredited is being held up to a standard that is fair across all jurisdictions, and make sure that any insurers that are located in one state are held to high enough standards to do business in other states.
Thank you so much. Please continue.
Okay. So as I said, this is a new NAIC Model Act. This model was approved in 2021 and has so far been adopted by 7 states. We have unanimous support from the industry so far on these changes. In fact, the industry groups that testified in this bill in the interim very much shaped the language of this draft and the amounts that we are proposing to allow for the rebating standards. As I said, with the red markings, I'm going to let everyone know what's current language and what are changes that are coming from the model. So if we start on page 1, nothing really to talk about there. Page 2, line 7, we're updating statutory references. As I said, we're combining a bunch of statutes, so we are going to strike 2 statutes in total. As you'll see on line 12 and line 14 and 15, these are where we have combined different statutes from different lines into one, and we're making that language consistent across all lines. On line 19, you'll see that we have removed disability from the statute. Disability is included in the definition of insurance, so we don't feel it's necessary to call it out specifically.
May I interrupt you for just a second?
Yes, sir.
Housekeeping. You know, we've given a bill to Boner and we've given a bill to Senator Scott, so this bill's going to go to either Barlow or Landon, so you might want to take good notes.
Did you notice? Did you notice we take?
I saw you writing like crazy. So we'll probably give it to Barlow. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Thank you very much, Mr. Stevens. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we go to page 3 on line 7, we have removed knowingly permit and replaced it with authorize. We removed that because we can't prove if somebody knowingly permitted. We can't prove knowledge on an individual person, so authorize made more sense. On line 13, we added receiver accept on the rebating language because we want to make sure that a customer that receives an illegal rebate can't feign ignorance. They can't say, well, I didn't know that my insurance agent wasn't allowed to send me on a $3,000 outfitting trip for elk. We want to make sure we can hold everyone accountable. Also on line 14 and 22 on page 3, we've removed annuity for the same reason we removed disability on the previous page. It is already included in the definition of insurance. Page 4 is where it starts to look awfully red. Lines 4 through 10 are model language. However, we do have similar language currently in 2613-109A1. We are removing that section, so we are putting it in here. Starting on line 12 on page 4 and going all the way to the end of line 5 or the end of page 5, that is current language that is in 2613-111. We're proposing to strike 111 and move everything to this section 110. Moving over to page 6, lines 1 through 6 are currently in 2613-112. We are striking that section as well. 8 through 15 are current in 2613-111. And starting on 17, this is model language that tells us what the insurers may offer to their policyholders. So these are defined as value-added products, and what they must do is, they're there to make sure that there's loss mitigation, as seen on page 7. They're reducing claim costs. They're providing education. We're really making sure that the policyholders are better educated on how to mitigate the risk and cause fewer losses, which will in turn drive down premiums, we believe. It also provides devices if there is a loss to help stop those losses more quickly. For example, if this bill were to pass, a home insurer would be able to give fire extinguishers to their clients so that if there is a kitchen fire, it doesn't spread to burn down the house. It's something that they can put out quickly. So all of these stipulations are on page 7. Page 8 also indicates that they need to provide post-loss services. On line 10 on page 8, it is specified that the cost of this product or service that is being given to policyholders needs to be reasonable in comparison to the premiums or insurance coverage. And if it is a device, the insurer is required to provide support or contact information to assist the customer in using it. Starting on line 20 on page 8, this section E, we need to have evidence that the product or service is going to mitigate the loss or educate consumers in the way that the insurers say it will. They have to have the data to show if we do this, it's going to reduce our claims or by this amount. If they don't have that, line 4 on page 9 indicates that they may have a pilot or testing program. They have to file it with the department. They can't have it for more than 1 year, and it can proceed unless the department objects within 21 days. Starting on line 10, this really goes to what insurers or producers in the state may offer. This is the section that we really collaborated with industry on. So this is specifying that if I am an agent and I have a policyholder, this is what I am allowed to do with said policyholder. So starting on page 10, it shows that we can give non-cash gifts, services, or items in the amount of $100 or 5% of the written premium, not to exceed $1,000. Starting on line 6, the same amount for quoted premium. This is, say, if you are quoting a prospect and you would like to take them out for dinner to talk about the policy that you've quoted, that is allowable. Starting on line 11, this allows for conduction of raffles or drawings. Many agents would like to be able to run, and companies for that matter, would like to be able to run raffles for get a quote to enter type things. So if you come get a quote, you're eligible for a gift card or a couple of tickets to a Wyoming basketball game or something along those lines. This clarifies that it must be subject to state gaming law, so it must be open to the public and free to enter, and that the total value of each raffle or drawing shall not exceed $100. Keeping on the raffle or drawing, starting on line 20, this just says that it does indeed have to be random, and you have to keep receipts to show us how much it cost and show us that the drawing was random. So that, again, if an insurer has a friend or a family member that's a client, they can't just pick their name out of the quote-unquote random drawing. We have to prove that it was random. Line 5 says that the commissioner may adopt additional rules and regulations when implementing the permitted practices. Lines 9 through 19 on page 11 are currently in 2613-112. Starting on line 21, this indicates the sections of the current code that we are repealing as we are combining them in here. And on page 12, will take effect on July 21, 2023. That is the general overview of the bill, and I am happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Good job. Committee, I want to point out one thing, and we just covered it on page 11. Lines 5 through 7, it's the rulemaking authority, and it's permissive. It says the commissioner may adopt rules. And then I just want to jump you back to the title. And if you look at the title on line 4, it says requiring rulemaking. So there'll be an amendment coming to change requiring to authorizing, because it doesn't actually require them to do rules. It says that they may. And that was a catch by LSO. I'm not that brilliant, I promise you. And so we have an amendment in that area. And so back to questions for Mr. Stevens. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, a very general question on this bill. You know, we do not generally regulate insurance rates in this state, and haven't for 40 years or so. One of the ways in other parts of the economy that sellers compete is by offering discounts. And a good part of this seems to be forbidding discounts. Why is that a good idea in this insurance? Why do we need to forbid those discounts?
And I look to all three of you and kind of huddle. Who might want to address that? Ms. Howard, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tana Howard, Deputy Insurance Commissioner. Senator Scott, I don't believe this piece of legislation does prohibit discounts. This allows producers and insurers to be more business-friendly and give items or offer some type of, right now, if you were to go out for a cup of coffee with your insurance agent, it is against the law, and this would allow this. So in terms of discounts and for rates, we, as a department, you're correct, as usual, we do not have rate authority. We consider it a competitive market for all of our lines of insurance. We have over almost 2,000 insurers licensed in the state. Any insurer can grant a discount to their consumers if it's non-discriminatory and within the law. And that is true today without this piece of legislation. They can offer those discounts. So I don't believe that this would affect the discounts that an insurer can offer their consumers.
Okay. Senator Scott? Good?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I understand that. And a good deal of it does seem to be still regulating discounts. And I'm really trying to get at why is it necessary to regulate discounts at all?
I'll throw it back to the department. Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, well, I think there will always be certain types of discounts, safe driver discounts, bundling discounts, things like that, and we're not regulating that. I agree with Ms. Howard that this doesn't prevent that. And if there's this particular piece of language where you think that it does prohibit discounts of that nature, I would certainly entertain looking at it, correcting that, because I don't read it as such, Mr. Chairman.
But the abusive discounts would be unfair trade practices where you discriminate against customers and things like that. But
Mr. Chairman, that's correct, which is all across all lines of insurance.
Right.
That's always out there.
yeah. Look, maybe we can work on that a little bit more, but Senator Landon, and then I'll go to Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the department catching us up. We're changing on the fly. It's good to be back in corporations, but water is a little deep as we jump off the bank here. My question goes a little bit more to the enforcement of some of this. I've often wondered, I mean, there's all kinds of things flying around, and I often wonder if anybody ever really receives some of the stuff you read that they're going to. Somebody's going to win a trip to Tahiti, and I wonder if anybody ever goes to Tahiti. But how do you police some of this? I mean, I guess I'm just curious. This looks good in language. Talk to me about how you can find out if an insurance company didn't really have a random drawing.
Commissioner,
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, industry helps us out quite a bit with that. I mean, I had discussions on modifying this or modernizing it 4 or 5 years ago with OEA and the president and members of it, as agents would say, they're doing this in Colorado. They're having this raffle. I can't even give my son's sports team $100 to go to a baseball tournament because the coach is a client. And so the agents are actually quite helpful with what's going on out there. And that was the point 4 or 5 years ago where we said, yeah, let's try to look at this. And the model law came out, and we've been waiting to do this ever since. It is always, you don't know what you don't see until someone tells you. I mean, obviously, there's always that concern, but at least we have something on paper where if it were to occur, we could look into it.
Just a quick
go ahead, follow up.
Follow up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a little bit different line of questioning. I think I heard you say that only 7 states have jumped on board with this model legislation. Are more states considering it, and why have we not had more states come on board in the last couple of years?
Who's got that one? Mr. Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Landon, only 7 states have jumped on board because this is brand new. This was passed in October of 2021. There have only been 7 states that have had a chance to get it through their legislature yet. There are quite a few that have not updated their code in quite some time, as we have, and there are indications that they will be jumping on board. I will say that the 7 states that have adopted so far are allowable rebating numbers are right in line with what they have passed to.
And
Just one final question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stevens, I'd be hopeful that you'd be willing to share some notes with the committee as we take it upstairs.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, yes, sir. I actually have a printout right here that I would be happy to give you.
Thanks for the cheat sheet.
excellent. So, and Senator Landon being former chairman of this committee, as Senator Scott is former chairman of this committee, I think probably they don't have as good a corporations committees in those other states, the ones that haven't got to it yet. Senator Barlow, the floor is yours.
It's okay to lead, right?
It is sometimes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being the weak link on the committee,
No, sir.
I will, and having never served on the committee, so I just want to clarify that a lot of this is current statute, we're just reorganizing statute. I recognize that, consolidating so that all the lines of insurance that you regulate fall under the same rebating practices, et cetera. It strikes me, though, and to Senator Scott's, though, on page 4, I think this speaks actually is that you don't prohibit the paying of bonuses or abating premiums. This would apply to all, and I think that goes to, this is not prohibiting that. What actually strikes me more is that under this section, section B, and this is existing language, 2613-111 was what I think I got the quotation correctly, is all of these are reductions except Romanet number 3, which would be, in my mind, the way I interpret that, the premium could actually be increased. Everything else here I rate as a decrease in potential premiums for whatever reason. That one is actually an increase, and I would say because of claims loss, because of the amount of claims and loss. So am I reading this accurately, that everything in here is a decrease except potentially that one? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Who would like to take that? Ms. Howard, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Barlow, you are correct that Romanet number 3 could be interpreted as a rate increase, yes. We talked about this briefly in the interim with Senator Scott. This is existing language, but it could be an increase or a decrease, and I think that's why the word readjustment is applied there. But what happens is this would be a rare case. It wouldn't be necessarily for claims, for increased claims loss. This could be applied to, it's only for group health insurance types. For example, if there was a merger of some sort, 2 employers that group together, the risk has changed. And therefore, if there are a claims loss, that is bound by the contract, by the insurance contract, and they wouldn't be able to amend that contract and readjust the rates unless the insurance contract allowed. Once the risk changes, this piece, which would be a very rare instance, but we do have to allow it, for example, like a merger. If that risk changes, it allows the new group that is formed to reapply new rates with the insurer and work out a new contract.
Okay, anybody else? Senator Scott.
Just a technical correction. The lead into that is found on page 4, lines 12 and 13. Nothing in 2613-109 or subsection A of this section. I haven't looked it up, and the insurance code is divided into various types of insurance. Which types of insurance is these provisions covering?
Ms. Howard, or whoever.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott. So yes, this, unless it specifically says, as the Romanet 3 does within group insurance policies, it would apply to all insurance, lines of insurance.
Any other questions? Anything else from the commission?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Let's, anybody in the audience wish to testify on this bill? Thank you for the good job. Yes, sir. Welcome, I love your tie. Reminds me of half of mine. Go ahead. Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself. Green light. Yeah, look for the green light. It can be tricky.
Okay.
Seems to be working.
It seems to be working. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee for your time and hearing our testimony. My name is Ken Hauk. I'm the EVP of the Association of Wyoming Insurance Agents, commonly referred to as a WIO on occasion. And some of you may remember the Shrimp Bash, which is coming up. I noticed that you learned how to clear a room, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned the word insurance and half the people left the room, so good job. So this short bill on rebates might seem like nothing too important, I want to assure you it's very important. I've been a licensed agent for 50 years now, and this is the first time that the conversation of rebates has been addressed on a nationwide basis. Modernizing rebates has been long overdue. The conversation started about 10 years ago, and a couple of years ago, everybody got serious about it. It's a collaborative effort. It's not just one part of the insurance industry. It included the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, included the National Council of Insurance Legislators. You may not have known they exist, but they do. It included the carriers, and it included the production forces. All of the national associations had a part of this discussion. And they came up with a template. And the template addressed almost all these things that way. The template was modified to fit Wyoming, and it was designed so that the states could do what they wanted to do. Home cooking, some of you may refer to that from time to time. So at least, and my information is at least 12 states have modernized their rebate statutes, and that's because some of them did it before the Model Act actually came out. So this has been going on for a long time. WIA does support this bill. And I have to admit, several decades ago, I was a habitual violator of the rebate laws. I took my clients to lunch, took them to dinner, did all those kind of things, took my prospects to lunch. Those things happen on a daily basis in business, and those of you who are in business know that does happen that way. And I will say that no one ever criticized an insurance agent for taking somebody to lunch. You know, the insurance department just doesn't have that interest to punish that thing. So this would clarify this a little bit, make it have some bank boards on it, so it's not wide open. So you can't take them to lunch in Tahiti, but you can take them to lunch down at the coffee shop. There was one of you, I believe it was Senator Scott, talked about discounts. And interestingly enough, the insurance production world, that means those of us who sell the insurance product, are one of the few licensed industries that don't even have the ability to set our own rates, not allowed to charge what we would normally want to charge. And if you think of all the other licensed professions, they generally have the ability to set their own fee schedule. We don't. We take the pricing that the insurance companies give us and the commission structure that the insurance companies give us. So this gives us a little latitude. And I will tell you that, and I'm not sure this addresses it well enough, but I will tell you that when you're an insurance agent in a small town in particular, you buy a steer at the 4-H livestock, and every one of us quiver a little bit when we write a check for $2,000 or $3,000 because we know that could be considered a rebate or an inducement. And this bill does not clarify that that's marketing or advertising. So we would defend ourselves and say it was, but it doesn't necessarily do that. I insured quite a few nonprofits in my day, and I always was a little concerned when I wrote a check for a donation to the nonprofit that I insured. Mm-hmm. Because that is technically that would have been a rebate and or an inducement either way if it's prospect. And then, if you go to a Little League game of any kind, you'll see banners hanging on the fences. And again, they're advertisements. But if I bought that advertisement from the kid of one of my customers or one of my prospects, logically, it could be considered a rebate or inducement. And I will tell you that I don't believe the insurance department has ever done that to anyone, but we don't want the future insurance departments to do that as well. So this bill is very good. I think this does an extremely good job of explaining what is acceptable. And there's page 4 through 9, line 12 through, not line 8 and page 9, those are all things that are acceptable now. That just, we're always hiding off on the backside. You're always worried about, can I do this or can I not do this? And some of those, well, all of those are good modernization. Item Romanet number 9 on page 9, I believe it is, that is actually one of the most predominant things on the marketplace now, where insurance companies are putting telematics in cars. We all can plug something into our car, and they can monitor our driving habits and give us a discount if we deserve it. So that is modernization. That's clearly one of those things.
That's one I'm not too happy about, I might add.
Well, I am, because I plugged it in my car.
You're insuring me.
Mr. Chairman, I am very happy because I plugged it in my car and they realized I only put on a few thousand miles a year and they gave me a discount. So I'm very happy about that. Now, my insurance agent probably wasn't, because his commission went down. So WIA stands in support of this, and we believe it's been a long time coming. And the fact that most states haven't done this yet is simply because their legislature hadn't met yet. So I think this is going to be countrywide, and some states are way more aggressive and doing better, doing more things with their bill, and some are doing a little less, but everybody's doing something, and it will all happen across the country. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you so much. It was great. Any questions? Thank you, sir. Ms. Wilkinson. Sure.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Catherine Wilkinson, this time on behalf of American Property Casualty Insurance Association. Mr. Chairman, this issue was brought up during the interim, and we stand in support of the bill. However, I don't know how we missed this during the interim, but just flagged this. It was actually LexisNexis, as you'll recall, on another issue. They tend to catch a lot of things. There is a drafting error, we believe. I'm not sure if it was during the interim, but needs to be corrected if the committee would entertain it, and that would be on page 2 of the bill. There is a strikeout on line 12 of individuals and an insertion of persons or property. As you all know, Wyoming law defines persons very broadly to include corporations. We do see this as an issue with discrimination laws. So discrimination laws protect people, they don't protect property. And the NAIC model language specifically has it as individuals. So we think that this would open it up to potential liability for carriers in discrimination claims against property. So we would just recommend that the committee consider changing that language back to individuals and striking that persons or property. And I am also joined by State Farm, the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies, NAMIC, LexisNexis, and the Rocky Mountain Insurance Association in this. This concern was strong enough that it changed us from full support, the act, we support the act, they need to be modernized. It changed it into opposition just based on that one word. So that amendment is adopted. We all fully support it, and I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Wilkinson? Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll hear from the Department of Insurance about that too.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to address the committee on this bill? Is there anybody online? We don't have anybody online. Anybody else in the room? All right. Let's go back to the Department of Insurance and discuss the concept of the amendment brought by Ms. Wilkinson. Is she right or wrong? I got a feeling I know the answer. Or maybe it's in the middle. Who's going to address it? Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, again, Brian Stevens, licensing supervisor for the Department of Insurance. So in the NAIC Model Act, they have about 4 different sections that are talking about unfair discrimination on various things. I drafted this, by the way, so I can tell you exactly what our intention was behind it. Currently, the section 2613-109 is titled Unfair Discrimination Prohibited in Regard to Life Insurance, Annuities, and Disability Insurance. As I said, we're combining everything together so that it's not specifying life and health and property and casualty. So what we've done here is, rather than just saying individuals, which would be very much appropriate under life, annuities, and disability, we are combining that with the property and casualty standards. So in the NAIC Model Act, it talks about discrimination against residential property risks. So we did want to make sure that we added persons or property to make the unfair discrimination laws, or the unfair discrimination much broader, and make sure that no one is treated any differently and unfairly.
Uh-oh, I've never seen this happen before. Questions? You had a question, Senator Landon? Usually the department and Ms. Wilkinson are like on the same page. This is very significant. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess, I understand we're trying to modernize and consolidate, et cetera. Do we need actually the words individuals, persons, or property? What if we just said something like insureds, between the insureds? So between, then it would not indicate, natural persons versus corporations, et cetera. It'd be about the policies and discrimination between policyholders. I don't know if that's what we're trying to get to, but I'm just throwing it out there, Mr.
Possible
Chairman.
suggestion, and I appreciate it greatly. Mr. Stevens, we'll go back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Barlow, I think that's a great suggestion. I would also add that if we're going to go with policyholders, we would add potential policyholders so that there's no discrimination in the quoting process as well.
Ms. Wilkinson, what you're thinking on the fly? Why don't you come up and sit with us?
Mr. Chairman, just off the top of my head, I think that would be okay, but I would like to confirm with my clients and happy to visit with the department. And we usually are on the same page. We caught this very late last night, and I think I emailed the commissioner about a little before midnight on this one. So we will discuss and definitely get back to the committee if that would work.
Absolutely. What we might do, and I'm just throwing out a suggestion, is to go down the route that Senator Barlow has proposed. And it sort of seems to meet in the middle a little bit from our side of this dais. And then we'll let you all go do your homework and come back, and we can certainly we can change the standing committee amendment, divide the standing committee amendment, because we do have the one about the title. So it wouldn't be the end of the world, and we're all trying to get on the same page. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I think there may be a confusion here.
Let's hear it.
Is when we say insureds or potential insureds, we're talking about the people that are buying the insurance. The language persons or property seems to me we're talking about the types of insurance. And I think that may be the source of the confusion.
I think so
here,
too.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
And I'm just playing around. Is all insurance either regarding persons or property? Does that cover the full waterfront of insurance, basically?
Life, health, property. There might be financial type instruments, but they're not considered insurance. But
Mr. Chairman, there's casualty too, which deals with liability, but I think Senator Scott is probably onto something.
yeah. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, what would happen if we adopted Senator Barlow's suggestion, discrimination between insureds? I'm not sure you need to say potential insureds. I think they'd be covered. Insured with regard to personal or property and casualty insurance. Is that, or just, so that you've got both concepts there? Because I think what's causing the trouble is a confusion between that approach.
So just by way of trying to get us through this, I would hope we would adopt some amendment to this section that perhaps on the lines of Senator Barlow, and then we carry it forward, also making the conforming amendment to the title. And then that may do it. You guys may huddle and decide that it does it. And if that's the case, then we don't have to introduce a new topic going forward. Otherwise, this could eat up a lot of time on the floor if we're having this very discussion. So at least let's take a chance on an amendment. It may not be right. I asked everybody to huddle and get back to us and, you know, run it across the country, whatever you got to do. I know you'll do your homework. What do you think, Senator Scott? And I'm open to your suggestion too, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure the simpler way isn't to just adopt what I think Senator Barlow's amendment was, say, discrimination
Between insurers.
between insureds, delete the persons or property. And then if we need to, it turns out we need to specify insurance types to do that elsewhere, but I'm not sure we will. I think that.
Well, Senator Barlow did have this concept first. Is that the way you propose your amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I was just trying to come up with combining the two issues, one,
Yeah.
this, and then what we're trying to get to. And what I don't have is Romanet 1 here and the rest of the statute in front of me, and I can pull it up, and I certainly will. But whether we adopt the change that Ms. Wilkinson, and knowing it's potentially flawed,
Yeah.
and then come back with a correction on a committee of the whole amendment or something, I can do
I'm
that.
hoping
So,
with the word insured, we might avoid it. So,
Mr. Chairman, I am fine with that if between, actually, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I was almost thinking we just put the semicolon after discrimination, but I don't know what Romanet 1 says either.
not
Because
sure
then
it
as you go
goes.
down of the same class. But anyway, I don't know. Insured, maybe, Mr. Chairman.
discrimination of the same class, I'm not sure that reads.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, insureds, if that's a proper word for what we're trying to do here, I would offer that as an amendment.
Ms. Wilkinson, would that work as the temporary holding?
Mr. Chairman, with putting the semicolon after
No, I was thinking, I'm not sure the
as
semicolon
insured
works.
instead
Yeah.
of individuals, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, was that I believe right now that would work, and we will confirm, and I'll be in touch with
Getting
the
more head
department.
nods with the word insured. What do you think? Okay. We haven't really started, but there's nobody else to address the committee, right? Okay. So we might as well start working it. So why don't we go ahead and make the motion?
We need to move the bill first.
We can or can. I'm pretty flexible about that. We're going to get to a roll call at the end, but committee, you've heard testimony. What is your pleasure? I think Senator Landon just moved the bill. Amendment, Senator Barlow.
Mr. Chairman, I would move two amendments. The first amendment is on page 1, strike requiring and inserting authorizing. The second amendment is on page 2, line 12, strike persons and property and insert insureds.
Debbie, did you get that? We'll just do this all as one amendment, I think. But if anybody wishes to divide it, they certainly can request that. We good?
Mr. Chairman, I did get the one on line 12, page 2, line 12.
Yes.
Striking persons or property and adding insured, but I didn't get the complete one on page 1.
And Ms. Russell, it goes to line 4 in the title on page 1. After the semicolon, there's the word requiring. and we would strike through that word requiring and change it to authorizing. And this is my fault. This actually came from the LSO in advance, and I think I didn't forward it to you, and I apologize. So totally my fault. But so all we're doing is substituting authorizing for requiring on page 1, line 4, and then on page 2, line 12, getting rid of the proposed new language, persons or property, and inserting the word insureds. Do I got it? Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried. Back on the bill. Anything else on the bill? And before we vote, you guys are going to get together and make sure this is fine. Everybody's going to do this. I know we can work this out. Okay. Anything else? Anything else from online? Just double checking. All right, let's just go ahead and call the roll on this and go get some coffee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Barlow?
Aye.
Senator Boner?
Aye.
Senator Landon?
Aye.
Senator Scott? And Mr. Chairman?
Aye. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Debbie. First day, you're Senate ready. Thank you.